This happened 2 years ago when I was renting a house with my cousin in a rural part of Ohio, about 40 minutes outside Columbus. The place was old but cheap and we mostly kept to ourselves. One weird thing though, the basement was always cold. Like unnaturally cold, even in the middle of summer. We barely went down there unless we had to flip the breaker or do laundry, and even then we did it quick. One night I came home late from work, around midnight, and my cousin was already asleep. As I walked in, I heard something downstairs. Not creaking or pipes, but footsteps. Slow, steady, like someone pacing back and forth on the concrete. I froze. I knew we locked all the doors. I grabbed a kitchen knife and crept over to the basement door. It was shut but not locked. I pressed my ear against it and the footsteps stopped. Then something tapped back once on the other side of the door. I didn't open it. I just backed away and woke up my cousin. We ended up calling the sheriff. When they checked the basement, they found nothing. No signs of entry. Nothing disturbed. But one of the deputies pointed out something I hadn't noticed before. There were fingerprints on the inside of the light bulb, like someone had unscrewed it from underneath while standing in the dark. Now this isn't a huge story, but it's something that's been keeping me up at night for the past week. So here goes. It was November. My girlfriend and I had been together for almost 6 months. And things were going well. She had 2 kids from a previous relationship, a boy and a girl. The boy was fine most of the time. He liked to play video games and he never gave us any trouble. The girl was another story. She was quiet and sullen, and she would spend long periods of time staring off into space. At first I assumed she was just depressed or something, but then she started acting weird. One night I was watching TV in the living room with my girlfriend, when we heard a loud crash from upstairs. We both looked at each other and then at the stairs leading to the second floor. After a few seconds, the sound of little feet running down the stairs, followed by a door slamming shut. We didn't think much of it and continued watching TV. A few minutes later, we heard a crash again, followed by heavy footsteps running down the stairs, and then silence. This time, my girlfriend and I exchanged uneasy glances. "What was that?" she whispered. "I don't know," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "Probably just the wind." We tried to ignore it and focus on the TV, but the crashes kept coming, along with the sound of heavy footsteps. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "I'm going to check it out," I told my girlfriend. She nodded her head in agreement. I slowly made my way up the stairs, each step creaking ominously under my weight. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. As I reached the top of the stairs, I turned on the light and began to investigate. I checked the kids' rooms, the bathroom, and the closet, but everything was in order. I went back downstairs and tried to relax, but it was no use. The tension was building and I could feel my anxiety rising. Then I remembered the webcam I had set up in my office. I ran to my computer and checked the live feed. The camera was positioned in such a way that it would have captured anyone entering or leaving the office, but when I played back the recorded footage, there was nothing. I must have blinked and missed it, I thought. Or maybe it was just my imagination. I tried to convince myself. The next morning I got up early and went to check on my car. It was parked in the driveway, but the side mirror was broken. I didn't hit it when I parked it, I knew that. So who or what had done it? As I stood there contemplating the damage, my girlfriend came out to join me. She looked at the mirror and then at me. "What happened?" she asked. I shrugged my shoulders. "I don't know," I replied. "It was fine last night." She looked at me for a moment, then shook her head and went back inside. I was left standing there wondering what the hell was going on. That evening, after the kids were in bed, my girlfriend and I decided to investigate further. We checked all the windows and doors to make sure they were locked. We even checked the basement window, which was always open in the summer, but now it was firmly shut. Still, we couldn't help but feel uneasy. Every creak and groan of the old house sounded like a footstep. Every shadow seemed to be lurking just out of sight. Then suddenly, we heard it again. The sound that had been haunting us for days. A loud crash followed by heavy footsteps. We looked at each other, our eyes wide with fear. "I'll get the flashlight," my girlfriend said, her voice shaking. We crept up the stairs, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. As we reached the top, we heard another crash, this time in the office. We froze, our hearts pounding in our chests. My girlfriend and I exchanged a look, then slowly opened the office door. The room was empty. The only sign that anything had been disturbed was the overturned chair by the computer. We called the police, but they found nothing. They suggested that maybe it was just a raccoon or some other animal, but my girlfriend and I knew that wasn't true. We had seen nothing like this before. Whoever or whatever was in the house with us was intelligent, cunning, and most importantly, malicious. It wanted to scare us and it was succeeding. We packed a bag with some clothes and essentials and decided to stay in a hotel for a few days until things settled down. But when we returned home, the feeling of dread and fear was still there. We tried to make the best of it, but every time we heard a noise, we jumped. Every shadow seemed to grow longer and darker. We were on edge. Then one night it happened again. We were awoken in the middle of the night by a loud crash. We sat up in bed, listening intently. Then we heard it again. A slow, deliberate thump, like someone walking across the floor above us. We looked at each other, terror in our eyes. My girlfriend and I didn't say a word. We just listened. Then we heard it again. The sound of footsteps nearing our bedroom. We screamed as the footsteps stopped right outside the door. We huddled together in the corner, too scared to move. Then the doorknob began to turn. I wish I could convey the terror that gripped us in those final moments before the light flooded in and revealed nothing but an empty doorway. In the aftermath, we did what we could to secure the house, boarded up windows, reinforced doors, set traps. But the entity seemed to slip through our fingers every time. It taunted us, striking when we least expected, leaving behind only the echo of its presence. We endured months of this nightly torment until finally, exhausted and terrified, we fled, leaving the house to its chilling secrets. Last winter, I booked a cabin getaway with 2 friends up in the Rockies. It's about a 4-hour drive from my place. We usually do a big New Year's Eve party, but last year my friends and I decided we needed a break from people and noise and lights. So we rented a cabin. It was isolated, perfect for disconnecting. No cell signal, no Wi-Fi, just a landline in case of emergency. My friends loved the idea. We all work long hours and we hadn't had a proper break in years. We played board games, ate junk food, and drank wine. By the time the fondue pot was empty and our eyelids were getting heavy, we decided that this vacation was exactly what we needed. The silence was peaceful. The hot tub was private. The only sound was the wind and the crackle from the fireplace. On the second night, around 1 a.m., we were sitting around playing cards when the landline rang. I think we all assumed it was one of our partners or family checking in to see if we made it okay. But none of us had given out the number. My friend John picked up the phone. He just stood there listening. I don't know what he was hearing on the other end, but after about 15 seconds he hung up. I asked what they said and he just shrugged. They were breathing. He said finally. I laughed. I thought he was messing with us. I thought it was funny that one of us would be so bored at 1 a.m. that we would call the cabin just to hear the breathing. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. Same number on the caller ID. Private number. Maybe it was a wrong number. I told John, you gotta answer it again. For science. He hesitated and then he picked up the phone and said hello. No response. He said it again. Still nothing. After a few seconds he whispered, "Hello, is anyone there?" Just then, I heard a noise over the phone. It sounded like someone breathing heavily into the receiver. I told John to hold the phone away from his ear, but it was too late. Whatever was on the other end of that line had been exhaled right into his ear. He dropped the phone onto the table. "That was weird," he said, looking shaken. We all sat there for a moment trying to convince ourselves that it was just a drunk teenager trying to scare some people at a cabin. But then the phone rang again. Same private number. I took the phone in my hand. It felt cold. I put it to my ear and said hello twice. No response. I heard a click. Then I heard what sounded like footsteps coming closer. They seemed to be getting louder. Then I heard a whisper. It was so soft and raspy I could barely make out the words. "He's not sleeping anymore." And then they hung up. We unplugged the phone from the wall, obviously spooked, but secretly relieved that whoever was on the other end didn't seem to know that we knew they were there. In the morning, the 3 of us went out to start the truck. It was still dark, but the sky was clear and the stars were beautiful. That's when we saw them. There were footprints in the snow all around the cabin. Our footprints, of course, were visible too, but these weren't ours. These were from the night before. The same footprints led from the road up to the porch and then circled the cabin. Whoever had been calling us from the road outside our cabin in the middle of the night had walked all the way around the building. If you're wondering what we did the rest of that day, it was less hot tub and fondue and more lock all the doors and do and go outside. We started researching the cabin online. How old was it? When was it built? Were there any accidents in the area? None of those things turned up anything. But then we found the previous guest's book. We discovered the cabin had been built sometime in the 90s, and it had been rented many times. One page in particular caught our attention. A group of 6 guys rented the cabin a year prior to our stay. We won't name names, but one of the guys wrote this in the guest book. "If you rent this cabin, watch out for Danny. He likes to sneak in your room and breathe really loud in your ear. Signed, Matt. Matt, if you're watching this, I hope you're proud of yourself. You scared the crap out of me, John and Mike last weekend. I want to apologize for accusing you of murder there." As soon as I read that, I called my friend. I told him about the phone calls and the footprints and the strange message. He admitted that he had written that in the guest book as a joke. We all had a good laugh about it. He assured me he wasn't at the cabin that weekend though. The footprint in the snow by the truck was bigger than mine. Mine a size 10. The print was a size 12 or 13. Matt, if you're watching this, I hope you're proud of yourself because you scared the crap out of me, John and Mike last weekend. We decided to stick together and stay inside for the rest of our trip. We never got over how freaked out we were. We couldn't even listen to the audio recording I made of the breathing on the phone. It was just too scary. After that, we started checking other things out. Who was Danny? Was he a drifter who hung around the woods near the cabin? Did he have mental problems? Had he done this to other renters? Well, we never found out. The next day we packed up and headed home. We stopped for coffee and to use the bathroom. That's when I checked my phone. I had missed call from an unknown number. It was a local exchange, so I figured it was probably someone from the cabin trying to reach me. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened to it later, this is what I heard. "Hi Sarah, it's me. I just wanted to check up on you guys. How was your stay at the cabin?" I rewound it and listened to it again. "How was your stay at the cabin?" I stared at the phone, stunned. I knew that voice. It was the owner of the cabin. I called back. "Hi Sarah, how was your stay at the cabin?" She said, fine," I said. "Everything okay?" She paused. "Yeah, I just wanted to check up on you guys. Everything was fine, right?" "Oh yeah, everything was fine." I lied. "No problems." She pressed. "Nope. We had a great time." "Why are you asking?" "Oh, just making sure. Some renters have mentioned strange noises at night." "You didn't hear anything, I hope?" "Yeah, we actually did," I said slowly. I told her about the phone calls and the footprints. She was silent for a moment. "Well, I'm glad you had a good time anyway," she finally said. "Me too," I replied. "Thanks for calling." She hung up. As the miles passed between us and the cabin, I couldn't stop replaying the message in my head. Some renters have mentioned strange noises at night. You didn't hear anything, I hope. What strange noises? What was she hiding? I told myself it was just an old cabin in the woods. There were probably raccoons or mice in the walls. It had to be some natural explanation for the breathing. But a week later, I was still thinking about it. I told my husband about the phone call. He thought it was hilarious. "She is probably just worried that you re-gone. Nah, leave a bad review online if she doesn't get her deposit back. That's why she is calling to make sure there's no damage and that you did cause a ruckus or anything." Like you said, the breathing could have been raccoons. I tried to listen to reason. I really did, but then I checked my email. I hadn't received a receipt for the payment of our security deposit. So I emailed the owner. I told her about the lack of Wi-Fi and how the fondue pot was unworking properly and how we couldn't get the fire started. Basically, I gave her a list of reasons why she should expect a big deduction from our deposit. I hit send and immediately felt guilty. I hated being a Karen. An hour later, I got a reply. "I understand. I will process your refund and send it to you within 14 days. I reread that message, puzzled. There was no mention of a security deposit. I thought we'd left it 2 weeks ago. What was she hiding? I'm not gonna lie. My curiosity got the best of me. I pulled up her website and I found the address. I googled it and I found a map. I knew exactly where the cabin was. It was so close to my town. I mean, we could be there in 15 minutes. I told my husband I was going back to the cabin to take pictures to help me remember the layout in case we wanted to rent it again. I didn't tell him I was also going to investigate. When I arrived, I parked down the road. I didn't want to set off the alarm. I jogged up to the porch and climbed the stairs. I was surprised that the door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. I ran my fingers along the wall until I found the breaker box. I flipped the switch and the entire cabin was illuminated. It was clean. There were no signs of a struggle. There was nothing out of place except for a pile of ashes in the fireplace. I knelt down and poked them. They were cold. I stood up and walked to the window. There were no footprints in the fresh snow. I drove home feeling defeated. I hoped I hadn't scared my husband with my wild story. I promised myself I wouldn't think about it anymore. I'd moved on, or so I thought. 3 weeks later, while I was sorting through photos, I found this one. It was taken at the cabin. It was supposed to be a picture of my friends and me in front of the fireplace. But look closely. In the corner, behind the couch, I caught something moving. Was it a mouse or something else? What the hell is that? Have you ever seen anything like that? A year ago, I was house-sitting for my aunt in Reno while she was on vacation. Her place is in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing sketchy. The first few nights were fine. I watched Netflix, fed the dog. No problems. But one night around 3 a.m. I was woken up by the sound of a door closing somewhere in the house. My aunt's dog, who normally doesn't even have the energy to bark at a squirrel outside, was growling low next to my bed. He started to get up and I immediately grabbed a flashlight from the nightstand and jumped out of bed. I walked slowly through the dark hallway towards the bathroom. The only light in the house was coming from the bathroom. I hadn't left the light on when I went to bed, so I pushed the door open slowly and looked inside. It was empty. I walked back into the hallway and continued checking every room in the house. Nothing. Every window was locked. My aunt always leaves the patio doors open at night so that the dog can come and go as he pleases. But they were closed. I called out, "Hello," just in case no response. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe it was just the wind, I don't know. But something didn't feel right, so I decided to check downstairs again, even though I knew I had already checked everywhere. As I came back into the bedroom, I noticed something on the carpet. At first I thought it was a dirty sock, but then I realized it was a wet footprint. The print was barefoot and human-sized. There was just one print and it was pointing directly towards the bed. My blood ran cold. Did someone break into my aunt's house while I was there? Was I in danger? I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. As the operator asked me questions, I tried to calm down my racing heart and steady my shaking hands. I could feel the adrenaline surging through my body, but I forced myself to take deep breaths and listen to the operator's instructions. The minutes ticked by, each second an eternity until help would arrive. I paced back and forth in the bedroom, unable to stay still. My eyes darted around, searching for any signs of danger. The silence was deafening. When the police finally arrived, I opened the front door and stepped aside so they could enter. Their presence was a comfort, a reassurance that I wasn't alone in this terrifying situation. They asked me questions about what had happened, and I tried to piece together the events of the night before. But the more I thought about it, the more confused I became. I couldn't remember hearing a door close or seeing anyone. Had I been drugged? Had I imagined the whole thing? The officers searched the house, but their faces remained impassive, giving away no clues as to what they had found. They checked the windows and doors, but there were no signs of forced entry. They even brought in a canine, but the dog didn't pick up on anything unusual. Finally, they found the footprint in the bedroom. The police officer who had found it crouched down and examined it closely. He said, "This looks like it could be a child's footprint." I felt my heart sink. What was a child doing in my aunt's house in the middle of the night? And where were his parents? My mind raced with possibilities. Had my aunt accidentally left the door unlocked? Could someone have snuck in without us knowing? Was this a case of mistaken identity or something more sinister? The police officer stood up and turned to me. "We're not finding anything else here, so we're going to let you finish your stay here if you want. But if anything else happens, call us right away." I thanked them and watched as they drove away. Once the police had left, I tried to go back to sleep, but my mind was racing. How could this have happened? And what was that child doing in my aunt's house? The night was long and filled with nightmares as I tossed and turned in my aunt's guest bed. Each creak of the house, each rustle of the wind outside sent shivers down my spine. In the morning, the sun streamed through the curtains and I got out of bed to use the bathroom. As I brushed my teeth, I stared at my reflection in the mirror, my eyes dark and haunted. I looked like I hadn't slept in days. Suddenly, I noticed something strange. My contact lens was sitting on the counter next to the sink. I blinked in surprise. I must have taken it out in the middle of the night without realizing it, but I remembered taking it out before going to bed the night before. Had I really gone to sleep with both contacts in? The thought sent a chill down my spine. I rushed to the bedroom and threw off the sheets. The bed was cold. No one had slept there except for me, and yet somehow my contact lens had ended up in the bathroom. Had I really been drugged? Was that why I couldn't remember anything? The police had searched the house thoroughly and found no signs of forced entry or any other clues. The mystery only deepened and my fear grew. With each passing hour, my anxiety mounted. Was I truly alone in that house? Or was there something else lurking in the shadows? The silence of the house seemed to scream at me, amplifying my paranoia. Even the dog, who had been fast asleep, now seemed restless, whining softly and getting up frequently. I tried to convince myself that everything was fine, but the doubt lingered. Days went by and the incident faded into memory. That is, until I received a call from my aunt. Her voice was filled with concern as she asked me about the house. She wanted to know if everything had been okay since she had been gone. I hesitated for a moment, trying to decide what to tell her. Should I confess my fears or protect her from unnecessary worry? In the end, I chose honesty. I told her about the strange occurrences, the footsteps and the missing contact lens. To my surprise, she didn't seem particularly surprised. "Oh, that," she said casually, as if it were no big deal. "That's just George." I frowned in confusion. "George who?" My aunt sighed and explained that George was her late father's name. He used to walk around the house in the middle of the night. I guess some habits die hard. I felt a mix of relief and annoyance. Was this really the explanation? After all the fear and worry, it was just my imagination running wild. But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. Something about the story didn't sit right with me. Had I really been going crazy in an empty house? Or was there more to those nighttime sounds than just an old man's habit? I returned to my aunt's house, determined to uncover the truth. As I walked through the quiet neighborhood, my mind raced with possibilities. Could there be a logical explanation for what I had experienced? Or was I truly facing something supernatural? Upon arriving, I immediately went to the bedroom. The footprint was still there, a silent witness to the mystery. I stared at it, trying to make sense of it. Was it George's ghost who had visited me in the middle of the night? Or was there a more rational explanation? As I pondered over the mystery, I noticed something peculiar about the room. The window was slightly ajar, just enough for a small child to slip through. Could it be that a young trespasser had crept into my aunt's house? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. Determined to find answers, I checked the window. To my surprise, it had been unlocked from the outside. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Someone had indeed entered my aunt's house that night. But who? Was it a prankster, a burglar, or something more sinister? The mystery deepened when I discovered a small object on the windowsill. It was a toy truck, one that looked eerily familiar. I raced to the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. The pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. The footprint, the toy truck, the unlocked window, it all made sense now. But the answer terrified me. It wasn't a ghost or a burglar, it was my nephew. My aunt's niece, who had recently learned how to walk, had somehow managed to open the window and crawl in. The thought that my nephew had been in the house alone in the middle of the night sent chills down my spine. How had he gotten in? Why was he there? And how did he manage to open the window on his own? As I grappled with these questions, I realized that sometimes the scariest mysteries have the simplest explanations. My aunt's house was no longer a haunted abode, but a scene of parental negligence. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. Despite the initial terror, there was a strange comfort in knowing that there was a rational explanation for the haunting. Still, the memory of that night lingered, a chilling reminder of the unexpected turns life can take. I continued my stay at my aunt's house, keeping a close eye on my nephew to ensure his safety. It was a difficult task, but someone had to do it. My aunt and uncle were clueless, lost in their own world. It was up to me to be the responsible adult and protect the innocent. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside brought back the haunting memories of the previous night. The silence was deafening, amplifying my paranoia. I tried to convince myself that everything was fine, but the doubt lingered. One evening, as I was tucking my nephew into bed, I noticed a small object under his pillow. It was the same toy truck that had been on the windowsill. How had he gotten it there? Was he playing with it earlier today? The thought sent a chill down my spine. Had he tried to escape again? Determined to get to the bottom of this, I decided to install a baby monitor in his room. I wanted to keep an eye on him, make sure he was safe. I set up the monitor in the living room and turned it on. They were, as usual, engrossed in their own conversation, oblivious to what was happening around them. As I returned to the living room, my gaze fell on the baby monitor. On the screen, my nephew was sitting up in bed, his eyes wide and staring directly at the camera. A wave of panic washed over me. How had he gotten out of bed? Where were his blankets and pillows? Was he trying to escape again? Before I could react, my nephew suddenly climbed out of bed and started crawling towards the window. My heart raced as I watched him inch closer and closer to the edge. Was he trying to climb out? The thought of him slipping through the window and getting hurt was unbearable. I rushed over to the monitor and frantically pressed the talk button. "Get away from the window," I yelled, my voice echoing in the room. "Don't try to climb out." But my warning went unheard. My nephew continued to crawl, his tiny fingers gripping the windowsill. In a moment of desperation, I pressed the emergency button on the monitor. An alarm blared through the house, jolting my aunt and uncle out of their conversation. They turned towards the sound, their faces etched with confusion. "What was that noise?" my aunt asked, her voice laced with concern. Seizing on their attention, I pointed towards the baby monitor. "Look," I said urgently. "Quick, we have to stop him." My aunt and uncle stared at the monitor in disbelief. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. "Oh, my God!" my aunt exclaimed, rushing towards the window. "How did you get out?" As I stood there watching, a strange calmness washed over me. It was as if the terror of the previous night had vanished, replaced by a sense of relief. I had faced the haunting not alone, but with the support of family. Together we had overcome the fear and ensured the safety of my nephew. In the aftermath of that night, my aunt and uncle took extra precautions to child-proof their home. The windows were secured, the doors reinforced, but for me, the haunting left an indelible mark. It was a reminder that sometimes the scariest things are not ghosts or monsters, but the shadows of our own fears.